There's a specific kind of humiliation that doesn't announce itself. It doesn't arrive with a slap or a slammed door. It comes quietly, dressed in a smile, delivered in a tone so casual that if you flinched, you'd be the one who looked unstable. My name is Nadia Calloway, and for 14 months my father introduced me the same way to every single person who walked through that front door. And this is my daughter Nadia. She's the one still figuring things out. Not she's between jobs. Not she's regrouping, not even a kind vague she's been going through a transition. Still figuring things out. Present tense, continuous, like it was a permanent condition, like it was my most defining feature, more than my name, more than anything I'd ever built or survived before that year. Let me back up. I was 31 when I lost my position at Merritt & Dolan, a mid-sized architecture firm in Charlotte. I'd been a junior project manager for 4 years. I was good at it. My reviews were strong, but the firm lost 2 major contracts in the same quarter, and they started cutting from the bottom of the org chart. I wasn't the last one cut. I was the third. That distinction mattered to me at the time. It doesn't anymore. What it left me with was a lease I couldn't cover alone, a savings account I could stretch for maybe 5 months, and a mother who called me before I'd even cleared out my desk to say, "Nadia, come home. Just until you land somewhere." My mother, Carol, meant it with pure kindness. She always does. She's a soft woman, a retired school librarian who still keeps books sorted by color on the shelves in the den. When she called, her voice was warm and uncomplicated. My father, Dennis Calloway, was a different architecture entirely. He was a regional sales director for a medical supply company, retired at 60 with a pension, a golf handicap he talked about constantly, and an unshakable belief that the world rewarded the organized and punished the careless. He wasn't cruel in any obvious way. He never yelled, he never made scenes. He simply had a talent for framing things, for constructing sentences that sounded supportive on the surface but left a bruise underneath. I moved back in February. By March, my father had developed the introduction. The first time we had neighbors over for dinner, the Hendersons from 2 doors down. Dennis was pouring wine and gesturing around the room with that easy hospitality he performed so naturally, and he said it for the first time. "And this is our daughter Nadia. She's the one still figuring things out." I smiled. I said, "Nice to meet you." I passed the bread. I told myself it was a one-time thing, a clumsy phrasing. He didn't mean anything by it. He said it again 2 weeks later when his golf buddy Marcus came by with his wife. He said it again at Easter when my aunt and uncle drove up from Columbia. He said it at my mother's birthday dinner in April, in front of 6 people I'd known since childhood. By May, I understood. It wasn't a slip. It wasn't clumsy. It was a position. He had decided what I was, and he was announcing it consistently, publicly, like a man who files the same report every quarter, not because anything has changed, but because repetition makes something feel true. I never corrected him, not once. Not because I was afraid of him, and not because I was too broken to fight back. I didn't say anything because I was watching. And I was building. Here is what my father didn't know during those 14 months. He saw a daughter who slept until 8. Drove her mother to the farmer's market on Saturdays, and spent evenings on her laptop in the back bedroom. He saw someone still figuring things out. That's what the introduction implied, someone passive, suspended, waiting for life to happen to her. What he was actually seeing was someone running 3 concurrent job applications, freelancing remotely for a boutique design consultancy in Denver, and quietly, very quietly, studying for her project management professional certification. I passed it in August. I told my mother. I didn't tell my father. Not because I wanted to hide it from him out of spite. I just wanted to wait until there was something he couldn't reframe. A certificate is easy to minimize. A job is harder. An address is impossible. The Denver consultancy, Forge Studio, had been paying me as a contractor since April. By September, the lead partner, a woman named Renata Osei, asked if I'd consider coming on full-time as a senior PM. The role came with a relocation package. A real salary, not recovered, not restored, but genuinely better than where I'd been before. I said yes in October. I spent November finding an apartment, coordinating the move, and wrapping up the last of my work from my childhood bedroom. That same back room where my father apparently saw a woman going nowhere. Through all of it, the introductions continued. His college roommate visited in August. Still figuring things out. A couple from his church came for Sunday brunch in September. Still figuring things out. My father had a talent for keeping people in the boxes he'd built for them. I think it made him feel organized, manageable, like his color-coded golf bag. Everything with a slot, everything labeled, everything exactly where he'd decided it belonged. What I noticed, though, and this is the part one couldn't stop thinking about during those quiet evenings, was that he never said it to be mean. I genuinely believe that. He said it the way someone says, she's always been the creative one. Or, he's the quiet type. Like he was summarizing me for the room's convenience. But convenience for the room as a cage for the person inside it. My mother knew something was happening by October. She'd seen the FaceTime calls with Renata. She'd noticed I was buying boxes. She asked me one evening, quietly, while Dennis was watching television in the other room, "You're leaving soon, aren't you?" I nodded. She said, "Tell him gently." I said, "I'll tell him accurately." She gave me a long look, the kind mothers give when they recognize something in their child they don't entirely know what to do with. Then she squeezed my hand and went back to her book. I booked a moving truck for the second week of December. The call happened on a Tuesday. I had already moved. The truck had come and gone. My new apartment in Denver was still a collection of boxes and bubble wrap, but it was mine, 11 floors up with a window that faced west and a lease signed in my name with my new salary. I called my parents on a Tuesday evening just after 7 o'clock their time. My mother answered first, put me on speaker. I could hear the television go mute, my father's version of paying attention. I told them I was settled, that the movers had been careful, that I liked the neighborhood. My mother asked about the grocery stores nearby. I told her there was a Whole Foods 2 blocks away, and she made a sound like that was personally satisfying to her. Then I gave them my new address. I'd thought about this moment for a while. I want to be honest about that. I'd looked at Denver street names the way an architect looks at a site plan, carefully, deliberately, paying attention to what's already there. And when I found my building, when I saw what street it sat on, I remember sitting very still for a moment before I signed the lease. Because the building I chose, the one with the westward window 11 floors up, in a neighborhood I was genuinely proud to be in, sat on a street called Merritt Lane. I said it clearly. It's 1140 Merritt Lane, apartment 11F. There was a pause. Not a long pause, maybe 4 seconds. But in a conversation with Dennis Calloway, who fills silence the way other people fill rooms, efficiently, automatically, 4 seconds was a geological age. My mother said, "Oh, that's easy to remember." My father said nothing. I waited. He said, finally, Merritt. Just the word, flat, like he was reading it off a map and not quite believing the terrain. Because my father knew. He remembered the name of the firm. I'd talked about Merritt and Dolan when I was first hired, told him the full name, the history, the partners. He had a salesman's memory for details. He never forgot a name, and now the street where his daughter lived, the daughter who had been still figuring things out for 14 public months, shared its name with the firm that had let her go. Except she wasn't gone. She was on the 11th floor of a building on that street in a city she'd moved to. On her own terms, making more money than she had before any of it started. The irony wasn't something I explained. I didn't have to. That's the thing about a detail placed correctly. It does the work without a word of narration. My mother kept talking. She asked about parking, about the winters, about whether I had a good coat. I answered all of it warmly. I meant every word. My father recovered by the end of the call. He said the apartment sounded nice. He said Denver was a good city. He said, "You did well, Nadia." It was the first time in 14 months he'd introduced me without a caveat. I said, "Thank you, Dad." And I meant that, too. More than he probably understood. Not because his approval was what I'd been working toward, but because it confirmed something I'd needed to know. That the version of me he'd been announcing to rooms full of people was never the real version. It was just the only one he'd let himself see. He saw a different one now. Not because I'd argued, not because I'd corrected him or confronted him or asked him to stop, but because I had built something real and undeniable. And then I had placed it quietly, precisely, directly in his line of sight. There's a principle in architecture. You don't fight the landscape. You design for it. You work with what's there. You account for the conditions, and then you build something that makes the whole site make sense in a way it didn't before. I didn't need my father to apologize. I didn't need a scene. I just needed him to hear that address. To say Merit out loud in that flat, quiet voice. To sit with that 4-second silence while the picture rearranged itself. That was enough. I still call home every Sunday. My mother tells me about her books. My father tells me about his golf game. Sometimes he asks about my projects, and I tell him a little. Not everything, just enough. He doesn't use the introduction anymore. Not that there are many opportunities. I don't live there now. But the last time I visited, in March, an old neighbor stopped by. My father answered the door. He shook the man's hand and said, "Come in, come in. And you remember my daughter, Nadia. She's in Denver now, senior project manager." He said it like he'd always said it that way. And I stood in the hallway of my parents' house, holding a mug of my mother's coffee, and I thought, there it is. Not a victory. Not a wound healed clean. Just a door that used to be locked, now standing open because I had built the key myself over 14 quiet months without ever asking permission. That's how I figured things out.